Now I'm ready. Okay, first of all, wow, on a Monday night, you're coming out to listen to smart city stuff. You got to commend it for that. So my role for the next 25 to 30 minutes is to make it worth your while. That you are leaving tonight hopefully a little bit more inspired than you were when you came in. So that's the responsibility I take to share with you what we're up to in the city of Palo Alto. So it's a pretty incredible story. Let me go ahead and show you my commute to work every day. This probably is not unlike yours, right? This is the world in which half the population lives in cities, so about 3.6 billion people live in cities. And every week, 3 million more people move into cities. So over the next 20 years or so, another couple of billion people are going to move in. And I would say to you, if we don't sort of fix that, it's just going to progressively get worse, right? This makes me very frustrated. I go about 12 miles, and it can take anywhere from 30 minutes to 40, 50 minutes to get to work, depending on the time I leave. And it should make us furious, because it shouldn't take that much time. The system is broken. Our transportation system is broken. And without taking sort of not only action, but unusual, innovative action, it's on a trajectory to get increasingly worse. So this is the planet in 2017. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about transportation as the main topic today, because it impacts so much of our lives. Tonight's talk isn't something that's abstract, that affects other people, it affects all of us. This is stuff that's going to affect you, it's going to really affect your children and your grandchildren in a very fundamental way. So take a look at this picture to kind of start to reinforce the message. This is the temperature as recorded by NASA over the last 100 years. And as you can probably guess, the areas that are in orange are the average heating areas. And as they are progressively at a certain heat, they're no longer dipping beneath, the temperature they were previously. And as you can see, as we approach the 1990s, into 2000, it's getting pretty hot. This takes us to 2015, but I have to break the news to you. 2016 was the hottest year on the planet in recorded history. Pretty hot last year. And so you might say, well, wow, that's kind of pretty spooky. What went on there? The temperature increased by 1 degree Fahrenheit in 100 years, right? And so now you can all be relieved. You can say, oh, thank goodness, only 1 degree. That's not so much. That's not a problem. Well, let me put that in perspective. I gather there's some sustainability people in this room. So if you go sort of 5 degrees cooler, somewhere maybe up to 7 degrees cooler, you get the Ice Age, right? When the Ice Age was in the United States, there was about 3,000 feet of ice over the country. That's about a 7 degree difference in reverse. So at the recent Paris Accord meeting, the participants agreed that we should try to cap it at about 2 degrees, the change. We're about 1 degree now. It's moving more rapidly towards that 2 degree change. And why is that? Why is 2 degrees the magical number? Well, it turns out if you get to 3 degrees, it's very hard for our planet to sustain life. Right? I would argue, I'd make the case that that's a pretty big deal. And when political leaders say the most important issue over time is climate change, I tend to agree with them, because if you can't sustain life, nothing else really matters. Economics doesn't really matter, nothing really matters. Now, why did I suddenly take this massive segue to the planet, right? Because I'm really interested in fixing this. I think you are too. Right? What do we do to fix this, to change the trajectory? Otherwise, we're kind of going in the wrong place. Well, what we have to do is we've got to tackle transportation. Because transportation within cities is 60% of the problem, right? So first of all, there's 2 conclusions you can make there. If we're going to solve climate change, we're going to do it inside cities. And secondly, there's just one category that makes up the majority of the issue. By the way, do you know what the other next biggest one is? Anybody want to guess? Pardon? Yes, eating meat. So raising beef is the second most important thing we can change, if you like. Now, it's kind of a sad story, because the world industrializes. It's now, we just turned the point from 10 to 9% of the world is not industrialized. And within 20, 30 years, we will have an entirely industrialized, developed world. As cities and nations become wealthier, they eat more meat. It's a bad thing, okay? And so we have to change that behavior. That's going to be hard to do. People like their steak and their meatballs. They really do. So maybe we start with transportation, which is a much bigger deal, and I'll talk about how we might do that. The last thing I want to talk about is something really, really weird, which isn't this our favorite thing? Right? When you're thinking, why would a guy like me be working in government? It seems like the most disastrous place. But actually, that looks like a really good problem to solve, right? In the 21st century, it's 2017, I can't believe it. In the 21st century, and this is how we still get service in some areas of government. That's not how we get service when we order products online or when we order a ticket, a flight ticket to go somewhere in the world. So we need to be able to solve this. People don't want to go to a physical place and sit there for ages and have an unpredictable outcome. They want to basically deal with government on a smartphone, it turns out. As does everybody. Right? We've just turned the point where more people now access the internet from a smartphone than they do from any other type of device. So the future is smartphones. Government the future is on a smartphone. And we're working hard in many cities to achieve that vision. So I kind of talked about that. Now, what would be a reasonable definition for this? If we were to talk about how can we distill down the future and how can we distill down a definition for the future of cities? Well, we really want to improve all these three things. Make cities more livable, places where people have meaningful, productive work, and sustainable. The last one I've talked about quite a lot. In fact, if it's unsustainable, the other two don't matter. Remember, that's the top level. You're gonna have a place that is livable and sustainable in terms of maintaining life. So if we convert this into some of the work I do, it's really using technology and citizen engagement to be able to make these three areas here better. Now, one of the reasons I love this topic, and why you should love it too, is because it's so diverse. There's such an abundance of opportunity. Now, I spent most of my career in the private sector. I'm a newbie to this public service thing. In the 5 years, I've barely got started. When you work for a private company, typically you are delivering a service to a selected audience, and very often it's just one product or service. Sometimes it's several, but it's kind of in the same domain for the most part. In cities, you don't have that luxury, right? You have multiple businesses that do completely different people, that have completely different, they've every type of audience you can imagine, with different types of skills, with different types of problems. The issues with order are entirely different than they are for waste, just about. There is this sort of connective tissue around here, but these are all different. If you want to solve order issues, that's the area you should specialize in, right? And so that's attractive to investors, people go to school, startups, just because we have a lot of problems just in order, right? It's amazing to me, order has become such a big topic here recently, not only in the last few years because of the drought, but now because we got issues with water happening too much, too quickly in a short amount of time. But you take a look at sort of delivering clean water to people around the world. And here in the US, we're fortunate. A lot of our water systems are relatively effective. Although we've had some surprises recently, some unfortunate surprises. But the water that goes from the reservoir to your tap, a large proportion of it arrives at your home or in your bathroom. It's not the case in a lot of places. In many cities in the world, less water arrives at home than left. So if the water is flowing 30%, 20%, maybe it arrives at the house. You know why that is? Because there's leaks. The water leaks. This beautiful that started off as fresh water, by the time it gets to your house, it's only a small proportion of it. And water is such a rare and important resource. It's more expensive than the water, right? Clean drinking water. So there are real big challenges around maintaining and looking after very fragile water systems. And that's just one area of multiple. Now, I was wondering, what are the domains for smart cities? This is not the finite list. This is not everything, right? When you look at this, these are the areas that we're making progress on. This is the area where right now there's a lot of action. It's broader than this. But I wanted to give you just a little tease into sort of the world in which I operate. So the conclusion to me is, if we're going to solve these very big, complicated problems, we're going to have to tackle them differently. We're going to have to be more connected, not only technologically, but as people. Because we're not going to do it as individuals, we're going to do it together. Right? And the mantra I have around this is, we can't solve 21st century problems with 20th century solutions. We're going to have to solve 21st century problems with 21st century solutions. We're going to think completely differently. This is why this is a $1 trillion opportunity for companies, and why the playing field for startups is largely wide open right now. It's really wide open. It's a great opportunity. So what form is this thing? Let's do a little survey of the world. We'll go on a little journey together to the four corners of the planet. And so I'm starting off with, we'll play a little game. Where is this? Amsterdam, yes, of course. Wonderful, beautiful, built city. One of the things I comment on when I first been to Amsterdam many times. The first time I went there is it's like the first day I was in that was finished. Right? I was so used to being in cities that were in the construction. Amsterdam is largely a finished city. And they have, of course, they're interested in being smarter, more connected, and providing the right services to their community. They're very interested in zero waste. Right? They're very interested in this idea that if you don't create waste in the first place, you don't have to dispose of it later. It's a very creative idea. That's the kind of new thinking we have to have. Here's a different schematic. I don't expect, does anybody know where this is? Pardon? Yeah. Where? No. And so the reason why this is a drawing is it hasn't been built yet. Right? This is actually a new city that is called Dubai South. And some of you might be familiar with it because the airport, the Al Maktoum International Airport, is going to be the largest airport in the world. And not just size-wise, but people-wise, and the numbers are staggering. They're going to handle about 120 million people a year. Right? Even daily, that's a lot of people coming through a single building. So this is right now, and I've been out here, it is 125 square miles of desert. And right in the center is they have an operating airport, but they're growing it. And around they're going to build a city for about 5 million people. And they're going to build it from scratch, every piece of it. So they get a chance to do it right. They get a chance to learn from what's been going on for the last, if not a few hundred years, a few thousand years of city development. Here's another place that I've spent a bit of time on. This is a city called Yache. Yache is on the Andes. It's about 2 hours north of Quito in Ecuador. And when you talk about a greenfield city, this is the ultimate greenfield. Because when I went there, it was a massive greenfield, and they've made a lot of progress since. Here you can see some of they have the makings of a small technical college. And in the background there are some research facilities, and they've had commitments from IBM and Microsoft to bring in new talent. So a country like Ecuador needs to change its economy if it's going to survive. It's been largely dependent on oil and one or two other commodities, and that's not going to maintain them for the future, because there's no future in oil, right, for starters. So they get a chance also to start and do it right. And finally, this is a smart city in Africa. So this is about an hour outside Nairobi, in Kenya. Again, there's nothing there right now. This is an artist's rendering, so I have nothing to show you. I had these guys actually in my office just a few weeks ago, and I think I insulted them because they asked me to give feedback. And so I reviewed their plans. And in their plans I saw, it's beautiful, I mean, fantastic. They have plans for universities and gorgeous homes, and I mean, you know, people out in the wild grasslands of Kenya also want to have a good life and live in a modern environment. And they said, you know, what do you think? And I gave them some good supportive feedback, but I also said, you're building your city around cars. I said, that's the first mistake. There's no future in cars. Right? And I'll show that to you in a second. You have to think about designing a city that's going to be built in about 10 to 20 years that will be supporting humans for indefinitely, right? In a world in which people won't own and typically drive cars. And so that means designing cities differently. So let's kind of take it to Palo Alto and make it personal. But I'm going to keep on the topic of cars and transportation. I'm doing this primarily because I love it. Right? Hopefully you do too. No, but we're very interested in cars here because that's the way we're going to figure out a lot of things if we get this right. We're going to be able to contribute towards reducing global warming, but also we're going to solve that pain in the neck problem with trying to find parking space, you know, sitting in traffic all day long, because that cannot sustain. That will is tragic the way it is already, and it'll only get worse. So I want to introduce this idea called ACES. And it's the big takeaway, I think, for tonight. It's an acronym, and I'm going to talk you through it. Some of you here, I know, potentially have interest or know something about the car industry, so you're going to hopefully agree with my conclusions here. So we're going to start off with A, and go quickly through this. The A is for autonomous. Right? Cars will drive themselves. I'm going to say that right now, confidently, no doubt, cars are going to drive themselves. Humans will not drive themselves, drive cars. They might drive themselves crazy. They won't be able to drive, they won't be driving cars. In fact, and you can, in 25 years or so from now, I want you to come back and we'll make a bet. It will be illegal for humans to drive cars. Mark my words. Yeah. Come back and challenge me on that. The way you will drive a car is you will go to a theme park, and you will have the ability to drive in a secluded area with gears and all that kind of stuff. But you won't be able to drive cars on the motorway. Now, why am I so confident about this? Well, one of the things I really agree about is, particularly this is interesting to startups, is people believe in things more when they see them and they can touch them and they can play with them, more than they do with a slide deck. And so I had to go in one of these cars. So there's a stealth self-driving car company, I can't name their name, they'll kill me. And they invited me over to see their self-driving, to ride in it. I went over, it's somewhere in Silicon Valley, so I'll keep it like that. And it's not Google, it's a startup. And I drove in this vehicle, and it went quite fast. It was in a business park, it wasn't out in the main streets. And it felt safer and more confident than I do with mostly everybody that I drive with when I'm in the car, family and friends and people I work with. Humans are not very good at driving. We're actually really bad at it, and we make a ton of mistakes because we're not very good at multitasking. We can't interpret all the information that's going on in our environment very well, and we crash our vehicles, we crash into each other. And so here's a little bit of a downer, but it's important for my talk today. So people die in cars, right? And you probably know somebody who has passed away. But how big is this phenomenon, right? It's about almost 1.5 million humans a year, right? So it's not a drop in the bucket. 1.5 million humans die because of errors in driving cars. So that's death. The accidents are off the charts, and it's in the tens of millions, right? And so that reason alone should have us motivated about this. I mean, one life that is saved because a car didn't crash is worth the world, right? 1.5 million. Imagine the amount of impact on people. This is a pretty big deal that we don't really talk about. It's sort of like our secret little thing. It certainly makes driving, and many of you will drive after this meeting tonight, it certainly makes it feel different, knowing that it can be a problematic exercise. Self-driving cars won't typically crash. I'm not going to say none at all, but they are going to be pretty good at interacting with each other, being completely aware of the environment, and we will see those numbers absolutely drop very, very quickly. By the way, if any of you go to an insurance conference today, you know what they're talking about? self-driving cars. Why? Because the insurance we pay, because we have so many accidents, is really good money for them. They make billions and billions of dollars. In a world in which cars don't crash, people don't die, and people don't have accidents, we won't pay for insurance. It'll drop right down. What happens to the insurance industry? It becomes very difficult. By the way, in the kind of another sort of slight side to this is what happens to the organ donor business, right? We're going to have to find alternatives because most organ donating is done by people who die in car accidents. Okay, let me get it upbeat more again in a second. Yeah, I got to go faster. There's so much I want to talk to you about. Okay, so what are we on? We're on C if you're following. A, C, right? C is for connected. Most of the world's car companies have their innovation labs in Palo Alto or around the area. And I get the chance to meet these guys. Pretty cool stuff because I love cars. And they tell me within a couple of years, most cars coming off the production line will be connected cars. And so this means your car will be very much aware, have ambient awareness of everything around it, everything from the weather to accidents, to better routes, to information even about the infrastructure. So Audi calls me up and they say, Jonathan, we'd like to bring our latest SUV over to City Hall. We'd like you to take a look at it. I'm like, that's cool. It's a great way to spend an hour or so. So they bring their latest off the production, fully loaded Audi, and I just thought I was going to look at the car. And they said, no, we want you to drive it. So I said, even better. My day's getting better and better. So they hand me the keys, and I drive. They said, we just want you to drive around the downtown area and experience the car. They didn't really kind of give anything away. So I'm driving around downtown, and I noticed as I approached a stoplight that on the dashboard, which by the way is just a screen, there's no dials in it, it's just a screen, it has an image of the traffic signal with it's turned to red. It has a countdown beside it, 20, 19, 18, 17. And when it's a 0, the light goes green. The car is talking to the traffic signal. We converted all the traffic signals in Palo Alto to nodes on the internet. These are no longer analog, timer-based traffic signals. These are actually computers on the internet that we can control dynamically. And they can also post their information to the cloud. And we have an API. And if you're interested, you're a car company or a research company, you can consume that traffic signal data. Now, when I got back to the, after that evening, I drove home my older car. I recently got a new car. I didn't realize how much innovation in cars have changed since my last car. Even the new car I have is pretty amazing. And when I was driving home that evening after driving the Audi, I felt, wow, I am completely blind. I don't know what's going on. I don't know I'm sitting at a traffic signal. I don't know when it's going to go red, green. I don't know what the weather is like a mile from here. I don't know if there's better routes to go home. Yeah, sure, I could use Waze or another app, but the car wasn't communicating that to me just natively. And so it's amazing how the connected car will be so instinctively linked to, you will find it so intuitive when you get to get one of these cars and drive it. What else was I going to tell you about that? I don't know, but we'll move on to E. E is for electric, if you're following. We are moving to electricity around everything in our energy provisioning. The world of gas, coal, and oil is coming to an end. Now it's only a question of how fast, and so one of the really important things we've had to solve is if oil and coal are cheaper than solar, we'll keep buying oil and coal. In fact, coal is extremely cheap. Oil has become cheap. It kind of fluctuates now, but it's remarkable how it has dropped over the last few years. It's become effectively more abundant. So solar has to be the same price or cheaper to be meaningful, and we've got that. We're now on parity with coal, and over the next few years it'll drop well below the price of coal. The coal industry is over, right? There is no coal industry in the next few years. The coal jobs are coming back. The coal mines are going to close. It's just like it happened pretty much in Britain. It's going to happen in the United States. It's going to happen around the world. We are going to make a dramatic and pretty fast migration to renewable-based energy. So something to look forward to and a pretty amazing breakthrough. Again, an enormous opportunity. Now, I have stocks in Solar City. I'm still waiting for this to go up. Right? It's a good sign if they're going up. It means people are buying it. So that'll be the sort of the point at which we know that the price point is dropping beneath the other non-renewables. And finally, we're at S, which you might guess is sharing. Right, so we're at the end of the ACEs. So sharing is where we're headed with vehicles. Now, I just love having other people drive me around when I have the opportunity. I love jumping into an Uber, or a taxi, or Lyft. And so I've been kind of challenging myself as, you know, I don't have to think about driving, I don't have to worry about parking. And why do I even own a car? Why can't I do this all the time? It's simply because the economics don't work. It's not the right price yet. Even when you add up maybe your lease payments, your car payments, insurance, gas, maintenance, what else? Lots of other things. It's still cheaper than taking Uber several times a day, right? And the reason for this is because a human drives an Uber and they have to be paid a hopefully living wage or more, and that's expensive. But what happens when you eliminate the person and the car drives itself? The cost per ride drops radically. At that point, it's going to be much cheaper to call a car on your phone than it will be to own a car, right? And the economics will make sense. We will stop driving cars. We will stop buying cars. Now, this isn't me saying this, because I'm the CIO of Palo Alto. You might say, what do you know, right? Who knows? Who might know? Is the CEO of General Motors? Is the CEO of Ford? The CEO of BMW? These people are looking out and they're saying, you know what, we make millions of cars every year. We have factories all around the planet. We employ hundreds of thousands of people. What's our future look like? And they clearly see a future where people are not going to buy their cars. This is pretty remarkable, right? It's pretty remarkable because they see a future where cars will just be shared and on demand and they'll be low cost, they'll drive themselves. So what happens when we shift? Now this is where I tie back to what I mean by being a smart city. Okay, when cars drive themselves, lots of very interesting things are going to happen, right? The first thing is, self-driving cars don't need parking spaces, right? Typically, they might have to stop temporarily just to get fueled. We may even solve that innovation by having power generated while the car is en route. Now, how many parking spaces do you think are in the United States alone? What's your guess? How much you say? Billions? So you're kind of in the 600. So nobody really has a specific, but we can use ways to measure it. It's about 1 billion. 1 billion parking spaces. That's a disgusting number. You know, we've basically paved over paradise, right? If you think about it, right? You look at you go to an American mall somewhere, anywhere in the country, and it's a vastness of cement that, fortunately, if you look into the future, will likely not be needed. Means we don't have to have multi-story parking lots. We can regain this. We're going to regain this land eventually. It'll take some time, but we don't need parking spaces. Now, when you come into San Francisco or Palo Alto or whatever downtown area, and it's congested, the dirty little secret is 60% of the people, 60% of the traffic are people looking for a parking space. If people could find a parking space really quickly or didn't have to find a parking space, we'd reduce the congestion by 60% just with that one change, right? That's a pretty big deal just on parking alone. Now, self-driving cars are going to drive fast, they're going to drive close together, they're not going to weave in and out, and so congestion largely is going to disappear. Our cars have the capacity, our roads in America have the capacity for many, many, many more cars than we own, but we're so inefficient, right? If someone brakes 25 miles ahead, it affects people 25 miles behind. You know, when people change lanes, it slows everybody down. And then there's, of course, accidents. So if we have self-driving cars that are coordinated and drive quickly together, congestion basically disappears. There's plenty of space on our roads. And of course, people who own cars will have less cars eventually. Now, one of the things I want to share with you real quickly is, so when we get to Q&A, I'm going to preempt your question, because you're going to ask, when is this going to happen? It's a guess, right? Some people think it's very quick, next 10 years. Other people say it's about a 30-year kind of transition. But the thing I want to share with you that might not have dawned on you yet, it dawns on me every day, is there's going to be a period of time in which humans drive cars and robots drive cars at the same time. And I look at everybody in this room is going to live through this, right? It's going to be really tough, like, because you just can't stop humans driving cars. You've got to transition together, and man, is that a big problem to solve, a really complex one. Finally, why is this interesting in the whole scheme of things? Self-driving cars don't need traffic signals. So you can discard everything I told you about traffic signals. It's all going to be throwaway eventually. Think about it, a car doesn't have to see a light. The lights are for humans. A car doesn't have to see a stop sign. The stop sign is for humans. A car doesn't even have to see a direction sign, because the car knows where to go. It's using GPS or some similar technology. American cities were built around the car. The grid system was built to accommodate cars. America was built and designed around the automobile. What happens when you change them? You change the design of America. You change the design of our cities. We can think completely differently about cities. We can look at this thing. We don't have to have an intersection like that in a future city. We can redevelop it. We can think completely different about the design of cities. So that is why this is all connected. That transportation is all about innovation in transportation will have a positive impact hopefully on the environment, but also change the very nature of the way we design our cities. Let's see, how am I doing for time?
Just I think 2 or 3 minutes, that would be perfect for the
Q&A.
Q&A.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have about 4 hours of content to share with you. Some of you look like you're something. I have lectured for 4 hours on this, by the way, but I won't do that to you on a Monday night. I will simply try to wrap up with a few comments. Let me just do these 2 slides and then I'll conclude. So very often when you see guys like me or gals talk about the future of cities, they use very impressive slides. And you're like, wow, that's pretty cool. Like, we talk about smart lighting and smart water and smart energy, whatever. I want to show you what it actually looks like, because we do stuff in Palo Alto. We build things. Well, that's what makes me excited. It's not just theory or slideware, it's actually building stuff. So recently, one of the projects I've been leading is to put in place smart lighting. And here you see a crew. This is right beside my office in Palo Alto, putting up some smart lighting. Here's what it looks like on top. It's a little ugly. Somebody said this looks a little bit like Big Brother. I agree, we haven't made the Internet of Things in a city context beautiful yet. That'll come next. We also haven't prioritized security. Right now we're really prioritizing innovation, and we've got to we're going to make it look good, and we're going to make sure it's secure. So let me tell you the quick story of this. It turns out most cities have lights, like they have these poles and some lights at the top. And they usually have power because that's what makes the light go. And they're like, wow, this is already installed infrastructure. If we start just connecting some new technology, like sensors, we can do all sorts of things, because that infrastructure is already in place. Sensors now, the price is negligible. It's come down to be very cheap. And there's a whole range of different types of wireless you can use to be able to capture data and then send data to some destination. So, just as one example, you think about your typical city where the light goes on when it gets dark. So it goes on right now, it's getting dark around 7:30. Light goes on about 7:30 and goes off in the morning whenever, 5 o'clock, whenever it gets light. And this is on, light is on regardless of any activity. So when there's no humans around, the light is still on. That seems incredibly inefficient. It made a lot more sense that light came on when there was something happening, like cars were driving, or people were walking, or somebody was stumbling out of a bar at 3 a.m. That's a good time to have the light go on. Right? So we have sensors on these that will trigger the light and the appropriate amount of light given the circumstances. And up here we can put sensors for air quality detection. And we can capture that data 24/7, 365, so we can identify issues. And we can make sure that we have clean air in American cities, something that we can't take for granted in many cities in the world are killing people. So we can do a lot with this infrastructure, and this is just what it looks like. Sometimes people don't really, when I say smart lighting, they have no idea what it looks like. I don't know what you have in your mind when you visualize it, but this is what it looks like. Okay, so there was more to share, but let me just conclude on this. So I come here today to not tell you about something that's been done, but about something that's going to be done. And it's particularly an important point if you are an innovator, if you are a leader in an organization, if you are a startup, if you're an investor, because the big money and the big opportunity is still ahead of us. It's not behind us. You know, the trillions of dollars that will be made in reinventing and redesigning your cities is ahead of us. And it's kind of a good news story in a world in which half our jobs are going to disappear over the next 25 years. They're going to be done by robots and AI, right? What the heck are we going to do? And what will we do that's sort of meaningful and actually has some good income to it? I suggest that our cities is probably a good place to start, right? Because American cities are not in good shape. I won't speak for your countries or the country you come from, if it's not America, but I know America well, and I travel a lot. I see the enormous opportunities ahead. So we're just at the very, very beginning. And, you know, my question, I think, when I have a chance to speak to brilliant, wonderful people like you, is are you going to help co-create the cities of the future? With that, thank you very much.
I think we have time for one or two questions, Michael. So,
This lady had her.
Yep.
We talked about how self-driving cars will get rid of the drivers that drive them, and how that is great for eradicating drivers who don't live. And then obviously the question arises what do they do instead? Do you think something like universal-based income is a solution before might be a solution? If so, how is it financed?
Yeah.
Might something like land value tax be a good idea? Could that be implemented in Palo Alto?
Sure.
can you repeat the question just for everybody?
Yeah, the question is, so all this, by the way, is going to displace a lot of work, just like a lot of our economy is going to displace a lot of work when more automation happens. Specifically, you said when Uber converts to self-driving vehicles, all those Uber drivers are going to be out of work. It's actually much worse than that. I agree this group really though. The largest employer in America outside of the government, which employs 22 million people, is truck drivers. And it's, depending how you measure it, it's somewhere between 7 and 9 million people. They're all going to lose their jobs, right? Let's not mess around, right? Trucks will be one of the first vehicles to drive themselves. So your question was, you know, what are people going to do? What do I think of land value tax, universal income, that type of thing? I have to say, up until 2 months ago, I didn't even know what universal income was. It's now a hot topic because this is getting more and more real. People are starting to appreciate the phenomena that we're now entering, which is, you know, an era of much less employment. Certainly of the jobs we know about today. In 25 to 30 years from now, there may be a whole suite of occupations that we can't even imagine. It's probably going to be true. I don't know that I know the answer, actually, so I'm not going to necessarily attempt it. I think the most important part of solving any problem is first of all understanding the problem, recognizing it, and then tackling it. You know, we have to make the decisions politically. We're not right now, based on trends and where things are headed. So there will be sort of a wake-up moment, I think, as we realize that the coal mines are not, you know, staying open, that we're not going to grow manufacturing significantly anymore. This will just be a cold, hard fact that we have to deal with. Sorry, I don't have an answer.
Once we have in cities this network of connected self-driving vehicles, are we still going to need public transportation? And in your cities, how do you see the two localities, so to speak, working together?
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, there will be some displacement. I mean, a self-driving vehicle may be for many people a much better experience than being in a bus, another form of transport. I try to think about these problems a lot from an economic perspective. I mean, if buses, which will also drive themselves, are, you know, materially even cheaper, I think there's still a market for that. People will want choices. You know, one of the questions I have, I think, in the border aspect is do we get high-speed rail in America? Do we get, you know, bullet trains that take us from San Francisco to LA very quickly? Yeah, that's not necessarily a technological problem, more of a political will issue. And so I think kind of summarize it, there's going to be a role for multi-modality for sure. E-bikes included in the equation. So it'll be messy for a while before kind of all settlements.
One last question.
This gentleman back. But Metro, the price will drop even further. Maybe it'll be free.
Yeah, Jonathan, thank you for a great presentation. I love the enthusiasm. I'm pretty convinced about autonomous driving. I think the technology is here. I think you made a pretty interesting point about the savings on infrastructure. If, you know, all the cars are connected, we don't need red lights, we don't need directions, we don't need... and there are, you know, obvious savings on lives, things like that. You spoke about for a while, and we've seen transition to things that make sense, such as, I don't know, solar energy, for instance, takes so much time. You mentioned that for a while we'll have real drivers essentially sharing the road with much better autonomous vehicles. As someone working for a city, do you envision the point where a local government or a state government essentially just taking away, and I don't think we have a constitutional right to drive, but just saying we're not going to renew your driver license because it actually makes sense. And just saying, you know, San Francisco, Palo Alto will be, you cannot drive there, period.
I do. I don't know what the form it'll take, you know, the mechanism, but I do think, perhaps you missed at the very beginning, I was talking about this idea that it will be illegal for humans to drive a car on a public street. I do see that happening because it will be so problematic. The faster we can get to self-driving cars, the better. It'll be safer, faster, we'll realize all these benefits. So introducing a rogue driver drinking or is on medicine or something into that equation will be increasingly too problematic. So I don't know, again, it's the mechanism. Is it a federal thing? Is it starts by not renewing licenses? Do you have some ideas?
I was going to say an executive order, I guess.